Hello, and welcome to episode 55 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. My name is Patrick Stemp, and as always, I have Jamie Maltman and Michael Ronn with me. How are you guys doing?
How's it going, Patrick?
Good.
Great.
Happy Father's Day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
happy
to you
Father's Day
guys
to you
too.
guys too.
A little belated, and to our listeners and viewers as well. Hope everybody had a good Sunday. I think I put in the post, too, that it was Father's Day for us, at least, but apparently I guess they do have Father's Day in other parts of the world, but it sounds like they celebrated it a little earlier this month, in the 4th or something like that.
This did feel late this year. I guess it's just like the latest it possibly could be, or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. I think usually Mother's Day, Father's Day both seem to happen around the 10th-ish.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's weird. It's one of those holidays, just like Mother's Day, where it's always a different day every year. There's no, it's not like Christmas where, in most places it's the third week in December.
Well, I prefer the second Sunday or whatever, because we've got a holiday coming up next week. It's on a Wednesday, so which isn't the end of it. It kind of breaks up your week. Take a Wednesday off, but a long weekend is always nicer.
Agreed.
So let's get to our roundtable, and then we'll get to our topic tonight. We're going to be talking about dads in a couple different ways. Our dads, being a dad, deadbeat dads, dads in fiction. We'll see where we go with that. So, reading for the week. I think maybe I'll go first because it'll be quick, and I don't think I ever go first.
Never.
So, for some reason, I moved away from the Vlad Telltos series. I'm still reading it, but I found the Harry Potter series is available on Kindle Unlimited, and so I grabbed the first one and I just popped it open and figured I'd read a couple pages and just to get it started, and got sucked in and read the whole thing, and I'm about a quarter of the way through. So that's the Philosopher's Stone, and I'm now about a quarter of the way through Chamber of Secrets.
Or I guess Sorcerer's Stone on
Which version are you reading?
Kindle US.
Is it the U.S. or the U.K. version being Canada? I'm just curious.
Well, it's the Philosopher's Stone.
It is called Philosopher's Stone here, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
So
we know what that is.
Yeah, no,
so
won't go there.
And I've actually read the first two books a few years back, and just never continued with the series. Not because I didn't enjoy them, but just got distracted by other things. And it is a series that I've been wanting to read from beginning to end. So I'm doing that now. And so of course I didn't want to just jump into book 3. Wanted to kind of start from the beginning and read the whole thing from beginning to end.
Have you seen the movies, Patrick?
Yeah, I've seen the first 3 or 4 or 5 all the way through. The last 2 movies, I know I don't think I've actually sat down and watched them from beginning to end. I've seen them peripherally because my wife watches them, the kids watch them, so I've seen enough of them that I know what happens.
Okay.
But I haven't sat down for a good watch.
The only reason I asked because Prisoner of Azkaban was on my list for the topic tonight, so I didn't want to spoil it for you.
Okay, I think
I've seen all but the last 2 movies. I think 1 or 2. So.
I think where you're going with that, Michael, is probably where I'm going.
Okay, cool.
With Fathers in Fiction, which not to get too spoilery, but basically, where the hell are they? Where are they? Where did they go? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Anyway, I know you guys have both read the entire Harry Potter series.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm going to get to at some point soon. Maybe. I'm waiting for my son. I'm going to read it for the first time with my son.
Okay. Well, they're good. I'm very curious to see, because I know, she was sort of a, it was her first series, and I know the series gets darker as they go along. I know the books get longer as they go along, and I'm really curious to see how that progresses through the story. It's going to be interesting. So by next week, I'll probably be done the second one, and I'll hopefully get back to reading the Vlad Telltos as well and get to that. That series is a little weird. I've already mentioned a couple times that it bounces back and forth in time. So I'm reading the 6th book now, and it's actually switched point of view, which can be a little jarring, and not just the point of view, but the point of view character as well. So it's still the same character, but seen from outside. It's a little boy who's kind of interacting with Vlad Teltos, and so that did throw me off a little bit, and that may be one of the reasons that I let myself get sucked into a different series. But I am definitely going to go back to that as well. So that's my reading for the week, and let's go to Michael.
All right. Wow, that's probably your shortest reading week out of all the episodes we've had. Pretty short. All right. Well, I actually am kind of back on the horse again. I finished The Girl with All the Gifts, so that took up a lot of the week, but I finished that and absolutely loved it. We talked about it last week, so there's don't need to go that much into it. But I was only maybe a quarter of the way through the book last week, so I knew what you guys were talking about, but I really didn't know how it would culminate.
Mm-hmm. Did their spoilery treatment of last week's show interfere with your enjoyment at all, or you were fine?
No, it didn't. It didn't. In fact, I thought the ending was pretty surprising.
And you guys didn't spoil anything second half-ish anyway, so.
The revelation kind of blew me out of the water, actually.
It was one of those endings that is, and sorry for anybody else out there like me who kind of hates this sort of thing where it's like you go to see a movie and they're like, oh, there's a twist, and okay, well, now I know there's a twist. I'm going to be looking for it. It's not really a twist, but I guess it's one of those endings that when you get to it, you're like, it's like, how could it possibly have ended any other way, right? Like, it's very fitting, extremely fitting. It's really good.
Yeah. So I finished that, and then also finished Green Star Season 2 by our friends Simon Canton and Dave Higgins. So enjoyed that. Great character arc. I love the writing. It's getting better. I think that's one of the series that's getting better.
Did you like the arc better?
I did like the arc.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was good stuff. So I finished that, and then, okay. Started this, finally, cool. 3 weeks later. It's due at the library, like the end of this week. And this is, and I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Rasel or R-A-S-L. There's no guide to it, but it's by Jeff Smith, so the creator of Bone.
It doesn't stand for something?
As far as I know, no, not yet. I'm not that far into it.
Is that just volume 1, or is that...
Yeah, this is just volume 1.
Okay.
And I just started it yesterday, so I still don't know what the heck it's about, but I like it. It's almost like the main character is like an art. He steals art, like he steals famous paintings, and he's got this device that allows him to travel across parallel dimensions in order to escape from the police. And so in the first chapter, he steals a Picasso painting and is running from the police, transports himself into another universe, but doesn't realize it until he picks up a Bob Dylan record, and it has Bob Dylan's real name on it, Robert Zimmerman. And that's when he realizes that he's in this wrong universe, and there's this weird lizard guy that's after him, and it's bizarre. I have no idea what it's about, but it's the art is delightfully quirky, and if it's anything like Bone, I think I'm gonna like it. So, but that's RASL again by Jeff Smith, and then I started your favorite book, Patrick. Started The Martian. Cool. I'm only one chapter in, but but I like the first chapter. I can see why people fell in love with it. I like the first chapter a lot.
And you're reading it, right?
Yeah, I'm reading it. I'm not listening to it. I'm actually reading it, which I debated on getting the audiobook because I've heard it's kind of technical, and I tend, I'm not a hard sci-fi guy, so I tend to gloss over a lot of the stuff, like when he's talking about the atmosphere and the things that he does to try to survive. I do admit that I kind of gloss over that a little bit just because I don't understand the physics behind it, but it still doesn't stop me from enjoying it.
Yeah, like you don't have to understand it. Mm-hmm. And he talks about it in such a, it's not like if you'll get to chapter 10 and if you didn't understand the technical details from chapter 2, you'll be lost. It's just detail, and you're right, there is a lot of it, but I think he treats it fairly well. It's just detail. I could see though how that part of it could turn people off.
I think what helps more is the character voice, right? Because the character's so engaging. I mean, you like the character, so you kind of are willing to go along with all that. So that's about this. I was kind of surprised. That's about the same length as The Girl with All the Gifts. So hopefully I can finish that by next week. So that is my week.
Cool. And then Jamie.
Well, I also read, actually, I read the whole volume of the one that you held up, the Russell Volume 1.
Okay.
And then I requested the next. I think it's 3 total.
I think there's more than that. There's like 9.
Oh,
there's 9. I think the series is done, but there's
great.
9
so
issues.
Just my library only maybe has 3, so we'll see where that goes.
That sucks.
Yeah, I think the story is neat, and what's going on is obviously way darker, thematically and sort of mature content-y stuff. So this is in no way a kid's story.
No,
at all. And I don't know. I felt like it's a mixed bag. I guess I don't know. The main character looks like kind of too much like a caveman to me, and that makes it seem really weird as you go along through that first one. Like it was a little bit off-putting to start with. It'll be more so as you go. Whereas like the rest of the characters all fit, and the graphic style is okay, but that main character, I don't know, he wasn't grabbing me.
He is kind of funny looking. I will say that.
Look, he does. It looks like a caveman or something.
And it's funny.
High-tech stuff.
It's funny you say that because when I picked up the book, I thought it was about cavemen. And I didn't read it for the longest time because I'm not going to read a book about cavemen. Yeah, that's not what it's about though.
Not at all.
The art is still good. I would be curious to see what it looks like in color though.
We were spoiled because Bone was originally done as black and white, and the color was added much later, right? So, and I gravitate to the nice colorful stuff, like the Amulet one. That was the color that's so beautiful. So that was a bit of a letdown for me. But the story is definitely interesting. I like that. So, so there was that. I also had another one that was out of the library that I was gonna see if my son would want me to read it to him, and it's The Wolves in the Walls by Neil Gaiman, which is, you should check that out, Patrick. It's like it's got like parental guidance suggested on it, but it is a kid's book. But it's kind of like The Rats in the Walls meets a wolf fairy tale with a little girl kind of thing, and it's a bit odd. Like
Wolves in the Walls.
Wolves in the Walls by Neil Gaiman. So it's Dave McKeon artwork. So it's got that edgy look to it. So my son was like, he flipped through it. He's like, I don't want you to read this to me. This is too weird for me. So, but I thought it was really cool. Not really cool. Like I thought it was pretty cool. Like that conceptually was neat, but I wouldn't give it like a glowing review for kids because I actually said in my review, like it's on Goodreads, that I don't really know if the market is there for that other than for Neil Gaiman fans. Like, if you wanted to read a Neil Gaiman thing to your kids, Fortunately the Milk is way better for reading to kids. Like it fits so much better, and it's got that nice flow to it. This one's just it's kind of like Sandman-y feeling graphics with like sort of Coraline-y weirdish stuff going on, but then it was just a little bit more disturbing to my son that he didn't want me to read it. So, but anyway, it's a cool idea, and but then the language is more like it would be for kids. So I don't know, just kind of funny juxtaposition there.
Thinking of Neil Gaiman, had you heard about that college student, I think in England, who's trying to get some books banned from her college? Did you read about that?
That's just pathetic.
That sounds like a horrible idea.
And the books that she's upset that her college made her read these books. Crafton Hills College in California, actually, is trying to get, and I'll probably pronounce a lot of these names wrong, but Marjane Satrapi, Persepolis. Have you guys heard of Persepolis?
Yep, the graphic novel.
Yeah, I haven't read the whole thing.
You, Patrick?
I didn't get through the whole thing. It was like, it's actually when you get the sort of the collection, because it's like a series of books, graphic novels, and it's really quite dense. So I enjoyed what I read, but it was like due back at the library, and I couldn't renew it. So it's one that I want to check out again sometime. And so Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, The Doll's House specifically, and 2 other books that I'm not familiar with: Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, and Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerra's Why, the Last Man. I don't know if you guys are aware of those ones, but I don't know. It just seems so. She apparently was, her professor assigned. Oops, sorry, clicked on something on the internet. Was assigned these books, and I don't know. You'd think that a college student would be a little more accepting of,
if it's like I'm banning these, getting these books banned.
She thought that they were pornographic.
I'd rather these be made optional and not be able to read them in my course. Those are 2 different things.
She thought that they were pornographic.
She said that she opened them up and was horrified by the things that she saw, that they were pornographic, and I didn't get that from 2 out of the 4 that I'm familiar with. But anyway, it's just funny. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good segue. It's a
Well,
good point.
I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, I don't know. At least that's a pretty cool college, if you ask me. I mean, none of those graphic novels were in my curriculum.
There you go.
Hmm.
Yeah, that says a lot. Oh well. Opinions,
Anyway,
opinions, right?
was that it for your
No,
week, Jamie?
no. So then
Okay.
we went on to so he said no to the Wolves and the Walls. We read more Asterix. We read more. We got into the what's called the Attack of the Clones now. The graphic novels. We've got like the 4-volume one for that. It's weird. There was the like omnibus, all of it in one, with like sort of the regular binding for the first one, but now it's like the weird library binding ones for the 1, 2, 3, 4 of Attack of the Clones. So I don't know. If I were a collector at the library, I'd look at those on the shelf and say, that looks horrible. But and then I started reading another Hugh Howey suggestion from in terms of sort of nature-related nonfiction. So it's called Nature Wars: The Incredible Story of How Wildlife Comebacks Turned Backyards into Battlegrounds by Jim Sturba. So that's my like dining room table or kitchen table reading right now, and it's really neat. Like it's so much of what you think is the untouched wilderness of like in the eastern part of the U.S. was clear cut 100 years ago and has grown back since. So it's talking a bit about how amazing nature is in terms of being able to come back, and how we've sort of mismanaged that comeback and our relationship to it, so really don't know how to deal with it when wildlife is coming into our backyards, kind of thing. So I'm just fairly near the beginning, and it's more on like sort of the reforestation side, but it's really, really interesting. And I put a lot of stock in Hugh Howey sort of nature nonfiction recommendations, and I'm enjoying this one too. And then finally, I finished Evergreen, the brand new novel by Kevin Tumlinson, a friend of the show.
Cool.
I was reading an art copy, but then it came out it came out last Friday. I think it was the 19th. Anyway, it was when the book launched, and this one's pretty cool. It's very different. It's like a sci-fi sort of espionage thriller, but with a bit of almost superhero aspect, because the main character, when he touches someone skin to skin, he absorbs everything they know, and they basically talk to him inside his head for the next 30 minutes. So he has tended to use that for corporate espionage and making money or sort of nefarious purposes for other people, and he's got like all this paranoid stuff that he does to set up his life that way. But it's not like a shallow, sort of espionage thriller main character type of thing. It's definitely, he's sort of an everyday character that happens to become Superman with these things temporarily, but is sort of bungling his way along and trying to, he's good at that aspect that he does, but as things start to escalate, he's out of his element, has to do some crazy stuff and use this in all sorts of different ways. And so there's some neat science, like sci-fi kind of stuff that'll start coming in, and really enjoyed it a lot. It was a lot of fun. Has sort of some quirky sort of tone to it as well, so it's not like sort of like Sawyer Jackson does, but that was definitely YA. This is definitely like just normal adult fiction. It's not like, not explicit or anything like this. It's not adult, but it's a normal adult protagonist going through adult situations instead. But I like that a lot, and I would highly recommend it. So check that out, Evergreen by Kevin Tumlinson.
Cool. Yeah, I started reading that one. I haven't finished it yet.
Cool. I've got that one to my list. I like the premise a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it, Jamie?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll move into our topic and I guess talk about anything related to fathers. And we already talked a little bit about what direction we might go in. Jamie, I think because we were going back and forth about topics this week, and I suggested fathers in fiction, and Jamie suggested sort of fathers in real life, and so we said, why don't we do both?
Yeah. Well, do you want me to kick off that side a little bit then? Like, it's funny because like my mom is a massive reader, and my dad is barely ever reads at all. Or before his stroke, he barely read at all. Like he'd read a little bit of the newspaper, but not even much, and maybe like a car racing magazine once in a while. But my mom is at the library devouring book after book after book, and she could just sit and read books all day. So it was funny having both those influences in my life, and it's certainly like I don't know that my dad ever read a book to me, but my mom read to me all the time. So that was an interesting, I'd just be interested to hear about other people, because like now, what have I done? I've gone and like channeled my mom's version of it with my voice, and I read to them all the time. I take them to the library all the time. I'm using all sorts of funny voices, and So I read to one son, like my older son. I read to him before bed every night. My wife ends up reading to the younger son every night, which is a good deal for me because my young son does the same books a lot over and over again, like Thomas books and stuff, still at the age of 3.5. Whereas my other son doesn't want to have stuff over and over as much. But it was interesting because like the one thing that made me think of it is there was a topic. I think I saw someone. I can't remember where the article was, but someone posted it was something like 1 in 8. In 1 in 8 families, it's the dad who is the one who primarily reads with the kids. Which so in my case, that is true. But that's a pretty small number, and I think that's sad. I hope there's a lot, even if they're not primary, they're at least secondary in a lot of families. But dads, go read to your kids.
In
How about you guys?
Well, in my house growing up, it was all I dedicated my first book to my parents for building a love of reading in me, and I think books were always available, and they're both avid readers, and so it was a lot of, I think, monkey see, monkey do there. There were always books around, and they were always reading, and I've tried to do the same thing with my girls. I mean, there's so many distractions these days with the internet and with everything else, and you just can't force somebody to love reading, right? They kind of have to discover it themselves, and you nudge them along the way and take them to the library, and they may be still taking out the comic booky stuff when you think that they should be of an age where maybe they're starting to get into the chapter books, and you maybe roll your eyes a little, but don't say anything, and just let them get whatever book they want, and eventually they, now they're reading Stephen King and The Hunger Games and Divergent and Holes, which is a fantastic book if you've never read it. And so they're, they see me reading, they see my wife reading like constantly, and they just slowly kind of come to it.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Started reading yet?
No. A book for her is just something she can put her mouth on. So she's not quite there yet, but we do have books for her though. We did get some books, that were given to us from my family and friends. So I look forward as she gets a little bit older and can keep her attention on stuff like that. I would look forward to reading to her. But I guess growing up for me, I'm kind of like you, Jamie, where I can't really. I mean, my dad really never read books that much, but and he always took me to the bookstore. I mean, that was just kind of the thing that we would do, and always bought me books and took me to the bookstore and library and anywhere else where books were. So that was kind of a way that we bonded growing up. And my mom, kind of like you, Jamie, was always reading books, still is. She goes through tons of books all the time. So I guess that for me was pretty important. And I guess another father figure in my life was my uncle. I can remember as a kid sitting at his house and reading National Geographics. I was more obviously interested in the pictures, but as I got older, I really started to read those and kind of piqued my curiosity. And I think it was, him fostering that and fostering my writing, I think was a really important part in me, being who I am today. So
I was totally going to say that too. That was the one male influence was my mom's dad, with his piles of National Geographics and Scientific American and Nature and stuff, because he was a chemical engineer, and so loved all that stuff. But he, and he read as well. So, whereas her mom wasn't as much of a reader. I think she was more like the newspaper reader and that sort of thing. So, but I remember seeing that, and he was always encouraging that. And yeah, they would get me books and stuff too. So, that did sort of round it out and balance it a bit for my mom. But it's I don't know. I just think it's so important just to have those, especially because people always talk about like boys not reading, that sort of thing. For them to see men in their lives reading is such an important thing.
Yeah, among other things, right? I mean,
yeah, among other things.
Yeah, I used to love magazines, like reading. That's back when magazines were fun to read, right? Back when editors and journalists actually took their time and wrote interesting or thought-provoking articles. Now you open up a National Geographic and it just seems kind of cookie-cutter. I think the era has something to do with it too.
I don't know, like Patrick might understand what I'm talking about here, but you might not, because I think they're Canadian magazines, right? But the like Chickadee and
Chickadee,
Turf
I
and
was thinking of Chickadee.
have you seen it lately? Oh man,
Yeah,
when I was at the Word on the
little
Street last year,
square.
Toronto. Like that was the Chickadee was like the kids, like the smaller kids magazine. And we used to get that. I think actually my grandparents paid for that subscription for us. And so we'd have Chickadee coming, and then we get a little bit older. There was Owl, and
My
um,
parents had a subscription of, I think, a couple of those magazines for my kids, like
yeah.
back,
But
10 years ago.
but now like it's so different. Like then it was all like wildlife photos, and
Hmm.
it was very realistic. And now it's very cartoony and very sort of loud. Like the graphic design is very different. And I've tried taking them out, and my son's like, it's not. He really isn't that impressed with them. Whereas I was eating that up at the time. So I don't know whether that's just the product again of a different age,
Yeah.
or whether it's partially the design. Like it's trying to be too cool for them, but I don't know.
It says a lot about how they learn too. I mean, the attention spans and I mean, children have changed in terms of what they're interested in these days. So that has a lot to do with it too.
Cool. So, what about dads in fiction? And I think Michael and I were thinking along the same lines without having talked about. And I was actually hadn't really thought about this much until today, actually, and just thinking about the podcast. And it occurred to me that really there aren't a heck of a lot of them out there. Um, where did all the dads go? All the, and all of the sort of primary characters in the books that we read certainly have father figures, but their dads are nowhere to be seen. And I think there's a reason for that, but we can get to that. So a couple examples. I had Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Of course, his parents are dead, but he's got Dumbledore and Hagrid and Luke Skywalker. Of course, his dad's a piece of garbage, but he's got Obi-Wan Kenobi. Katniss in the Hunger Games. Her dad died in a mine accident, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Treasure Island.
Yep, his dad's gone.
Right? But he does have a positive and negative in the same character influence.
Pretty much.
And I was trying to remember, Michael, I know you would know this, but the name of the character in Treasure Island, the main character.
The main character?
Yeah.
Oh, Jim Hawkins.
Jim Hawkins. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. And then one of the other ones that I thought of too was Sawyer Jackson. So it always see there's grandparents, there's a grandfather. Actually, in the Stephen Brust Vlad Telltwist series that I'm reading, it's the same thing. Father, very very early on, like he's maybe the first chapter because he ran the restaurant that Vlad then inherits later on. But the major male influence in his life is again his grandfather. I think that's because if dad is around while you're going through all these troubles, it's too easy for him to step in and help you solve it. Whereas with a mentor like Dumbledore or Obi-Wan Kenobi, you can conveniently wipe them out of the story when it comes time for the hero to kind of figure out how to solve stuff himself.
That's a good point.
I think that's why.
That's a good point. And you think about Bruce Wayne, Clark Kent. They're kind of the same thing, right? Their parents are dead, or not dead, but at least in Superman's.
Spider-Man, and it isn't every comic book hero's father dead.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
there's a lot of
uncle. Yeah, pretty much any comic book character, their dad's probably dead, right?
And in fantasy, it's a lot of dead dads, or generally parents in general, right? But there is quite a bit of that. I was thinking of
and if
Terry
their parents
Goodkind,
are around, if their dad is around, chances are they're probably a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
And that is the conflict, right?
Well, Terry Goodkind's Sword of Truth. That's a really good example of both sides of that. It's like seeming orphan, main character Richard, and his grandpa Zed, who's the wizard that he learns all the stuff from, and then later he finds out who his dad is, and that's a really bad thing, and he has to go and fight him and stuff. So, there's and actually he's like a really, really, really horrible dictator that tortures people and all sorts of stuff. So it's like everybody wants you to go kill him. So yeah,
It's be like an archetype, It's like the hero doesn't know who his or her dad is, and it turns out the dad is the bad guy. It's almost kind of a cliche in a way. I think we need more positive dads in fiction.
Well, I was going to give you a different fantasy one, which is going to come from a surprising place. And actually, a really cool fantasy dad is Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, in the first book. And he is a good dad, but his problem is his duty calls him away from his family, which then opens up the space for all the kids to have to go through all these different situations and not have the dad there to protect them.
So you have to take him out of the story for it to be interesting.
But he's also got his own,
interesting for the kids.
but he's also got his story and his duty to his family and his love for his family and his wife and everything about that. Like, so
yeah, but isn't he also taken out of the picture pretty early on?
He's there for the whole first book.
Right.
But
Pretty early on.
But the children become the central characters of that family, I guess.
They're constantly changing the central characters. But in the first book, it's he, his wife, and 3 of the kids are all, or 4 of the kids are all viewpoint characters, which is a really neat approach. And it's one of the cool things. Like it's funny. The first book is, things get more bloody and violent and stuff as the series goes on, and sort of the horrible stuff happening. But the fact that you're tracing this whole family that is actually working as a family unit, has in the past, is a neat place to start and a neat thing that he did with this, giant fantasy book. But then you got other sides, like other families involved, where the dads are, either just really like Tywin Lannister, the head of one of the other families, is like the good strategic leader, sort of, but cruel and efficient and that sort of thing. With the Greyjoy family they get to later, that there's some dad stuff going on there that he's not very happy with. So they have all sorts of different types of dads, and then some of the other characters who are orphans and are, in other sides of it. So a lot of interesting stuff, but there are actually a bunch of dads there. So I thought that was an interesting, different example.
Yeah, I had a short list of dads too that I mentioned. You mentioned quite a few of them, Patrick. Luke Skywalker and Jim Hawkins. But I was going to say, have you guys read Matilda?
No.
By Roald Dahl. Okay. The dad there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dad in that story is just a rotten egg. He's just completely selfish and doesn't really care about his daughter, and is just trying to exploit her. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, complete opposite. That's where you have positive father figures. You've got Mr. Bucket and Grandpa Bucket. Grandpa Bucket gives up. He and his wife give up some of their last money so that Charlie can buy a chocolate bar, which ends up having the golden ticket, right? So, and then his grandpa goes with him to the factory, and so, there's Willy Wonka as a kind of like a father figure too, and that's
so Annie. You maybe think of Annie would be another example.
Yeah,
Daddy
Annie would
Warbucks.
be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Annie would be a good one.
Right? Like,
well,
it's more the grandpa mentor or whatever sort of
stepfather,
thing.
Yeah,
adoptive father.
But it's nice to have someone get. Yeah.
He kind of steps in and fills that space in her life.
He's more than a mentor or just a role model. He becomes her father, right? So
right.
I think it counts. To all the stepfathers out there, it counts.
Yeah. Well, there's another one that I thought of, and it's kind of unconventional, and I don't think you guys have read this, but Animal Man, which is a graphic novel series. I think I talked about it a few months ago, but
you have, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those non-traditional superhero stories. It came out of Vertigo. I think was one of the it's a DC imprint, but it's basically, he's a guy, he can communicate with animals, right? What's so special about that? So he has a family. He's married. He has several kids. He's got a career, but he's got this superhero power that he wants to be a superhero. He wants to change his life, but he's dealing with that along with learning how to be a father, and I thought that was really interesting, like a really interesting dynamic. But if only the comic itself would have lived up to that potential,
So, votes for best fictional dad. I know who mine is. Best fictional father.
Atticus Finch. I know it's going to ruffle your feathers, Patrick, but Kill a Mockingbird.
Mine. It doesn't have to be.
I think that's a great one.
Classic.
Doesn't have to be from a book, because I'll tell you mine's from a movie. Do you have one, Jamie?
I don't know.
Off the top of your head?
He knocked it out of the park with the Atticus Finch one, because that's a really really good choice. No, I'm dead serious. So yeah.
Mine has an accent, so I automatically win.
Oh. Can we have runners up too?
Well,
Because
so
I can think of a few.
mine is Indiana Jones's dad, Sean Connery.
Okay.
He popped into my head when we were getting ready to go here. He's um, I don't know. He's just a cool dad, and he doesn't put up with any crap from his kid. And
Yeah.
I just thought they did a wonderful job in that third movie with showing their relationship. It was just so funny, and Sean Connery is just perfect.
How about another really cool one, William Adama? If you're gonna go to movies and TV and stuff, right? He's
Yeah.
an interesting dad.
I vote for Mr. Incredible.
There's a good one.
Mr.
That's a
Incredible.
good dad. Yeah.
Some good dead air there. Are you guys
No,
thinking? Or
no, I was just gonna say, I thought they
I was,
did
I was watching your dog.
I was taking a drink. Yeah, the dogs.
wandering around.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say like they did some really interesting stuff with the father-son dynamic in Battlestar Galactica with Adama and Lee.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really really interesting sort of fictional treatment you don't normally get.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're kind of winding down naturally here, and we are coming up on 40 minutes. So anything else you want to talk about? Fictional fathers or nonfiction, either way.
If you're going to talk about science fiction and stuff like that, I would say Worf from Star Trek: The Next Generation. My final vote. Did you guys ever? Oh, you can't tell me you didn't watch Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I did.
No, I was trying to.
I haven't seen every episode, and so I'm not getting.
I'm trying to remember him having kids, but
Yeah, he had Alexander. He had a son with a human,
okay,
and
vaguely.
his son. I think in the middle of season 2 or 3, his son comes back and he's with him on the spaceship, and he's trying to figure out how to connect with him and trying to teach him the Klingon ways, but his son wants to he's more like a human.
That sounds like they were trying to introduce a sort of a Spock.
Kinda. Yeah.
That type of character, because that's the same sort of thing he was dealing with, right?
Yeah. That's my final word.
Although they definitely played that up more in the movie, like the reboot than early on, right?
Oh, in the new movies?
Yeah.
I've only seen the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
couldn't
the
be
first one
bothered.
too.
Couldn't be bothered watching
really?
the second one.
I like the second. The second one was good.
Yeah, I can't comment on it because I haven't seen it.
I liked it. I like that. I like the new crew they did. So.
Are they doing? I love the. Well, I think we've talked about that before too. I mean, I loved every actor in the first movie except for the one they picked to play Kirk, which is unfortunate because he's the main character.
That pretty much ruins it for you, then, doesn't it?
I thought everybody else was great. Hang on.
I like him too. So.
Anywho, clearly we're kind of winding.
There's a. He didn't get to, no, I was going to say there's the interesting dad dynamic there too from the beginning of that movie.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hey, I'm going to save you, and I'm going to die. So. At least he disappeared in saving his family, right?
So the most interesting thing that a fictional father can do is get the heck out of the way. Let the sons and daughters figure it out for themselves because it's a lot more interesting that way. So we'll wind it up here. We don't have a topic yet for next week, but we certainly will by the time we hit broadcast. So we'd love to hear from you. Maybe you have a suggestion yourself, something you'd like to hear us talk about. You can send us an email at tbrpodcast@gmail.com, and be sure to subscribe on the iTunes, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a good week.
Happy reading, everybody.